Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the closing plenary session for NPC 2022 that will explore the imperatives of talent, culture, inclusion, and strategy. Well, I hope all of you are refreshed and charged up for what is going to be a brilliant afternoon session. We have a panel discussion, the funding dilemmas for women entrepreneurs. Women entrepreneurship is on the rise in the country with many specific initiatives launched by different stakeholders by funding for women-led startups. Do we need more women-only funds? This panel deliberates on fundraising by women entrepreneurs and why inclusive initiatives like women-only funds can possibly fast-track a more diverse ecosystem. I'd like to request you to please welcome our speakers this afternoon. Hanisha Vaswani, Managing Director, Majority. I'd like to request them to please come up on stage. Akansha Kumar, founder, Stealth Startup. Kritika Murugesan, Senior Director, NASSCOM, handling 10,000 startups and product. And moderating the session is Narendra Bhandari, an angel investor and member of the NASSCOM Product Council.
All right, good afternoon. Clearly the lunch is still working, so Kritika, let's shut down lunch. So the conversation today is about funding, right? And then funding more specifically for women entrepreneurs. I think yesterday has been phenomenal where we saw from the morning, for the folks who were here yesterday, from the morning, a lot of focus on trying to get more and more and more confidence, right? But we're just not talking about numbers, we're talking quality, we're talking deep tech, we're talking unicorns, we're talking world-class from India. So clearly, over the years, Kritika, we've seen this conference. Now the confidence level is totally different, and we're getting to the next stage. Then we heard from several founders, co-founders, women during the day where, Priya was talking about her second startup, right? After exiting from Carvalho and then now, forming Chalo and stuff. Clearly, we need to do more. I think the context here is we need to do a lot more, right? We need to do a lot more in terms of getting a strong mix of women founders, right? There's some data which suggests that less than 5% or 7% of the overall VC funding across the globe goes to companies which has a women founder, right? Now, data is something we can always argue for, against, sideways, but roughly give or take, that's a pretty small number, right? And taking a target of doubling and tripling is just not gonna work, right? So this is all a hockey curve type conversation. So the discussion here is primarily about what kind of dilemmas have we observed, women founders face. And my request to all the panelists in our conversation before is that be very prescriptive in terms of where this thing needs to go, right? We're not going to sit here and admire the problem. We're going to focus on where we need to get to, what recommendations they have, and they're going to speak from their experience. So I'm going to request a minute and a half from each of you to please introduce yourself, the context you bring into this problem, and then I'll dive into a few contexts. Hanisha, let's start with you, please.
Okay, hi, good afternoon. My name is Hanisha Vaswani. I'm a former product manager, so for all the PMs in the room, fellow person here, happy to hear pitches from any founders. So I'm currently the founder and managing partner of an impact fund called Majority, which looks at investing in deep tech startups that will also create an impact. So,
thank you. I don't think Kritika needs introduction. We should not even allow her to speak. Please, Kritika. No, and I do want to talk about the perspective you bring into this conversation.
Right. So, for us as NASSCOM, two things, right? One, in terms of the whole inclusion journey itself, from an ecosystem perspective, while we say IT sector and, is one of the leading sectors which represents different kind of inclusion, right? But when you look at the 10,000 startup program, and it's almost 10 years old now, and we had to launch a program for women tech entrepreneurs, which is called the TechWe program, less than a year back, because just the pure number of applications that we were seeing was very less for women entrepreneurs compared to the overall number of applications that we get. So we just had to do it, right? And even if you look at the whole DTC club, the number of women founders, tech founders that we have, there is very few. And there is a problem, and we have to address it. And we have to collectively address it.
Perfect, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. And DTC, for people who missed it, is the Deep Tech Club. We fondly keep calling it DTC in our conversations, but that's the Deep Tech Club. Akansha is a founder.
Yes, I am one of the struggling entrepreneurs as well. I was a product manager before this at Facebook. I left that, and I've been running a startup out of Bay Area for the past 1 year. My consumers are all over there.
Awesome, thank you. So we're going to have a founder's perspective, funder's perspective, so to say, and from Kritika, we'll hear a little bit about the organizational perspective and availability. Let's start with access to capital, right, since the topic is funding. So we'll do 2 points. Kritika, I'll request you to talk a little bit about what sources of funding, and when I use the term funding, please include grants and other equity forms of funding, angel, etc. And maybe people are aware, but maybe they're not, but I'd love for you to elaborate on how much support is coming from the various agencies, more focused towards encouraging the pipeline of women founders.
Thanks for bringing in that perspective, Narendra. I always say this in every forum, right? The number of schemes that are available, the number of grants that are available from a DPIT, from a METI, from the different state governments, I think but there's so less visibility on most of these things, right? People don't know where to apply for these grants. People don't know how to go and approach these schemes and be part of it, right? There is definitely one deterrent which will change very shortly in most of these grants and application processes, where sometimes they ask it has to be a 51% majority stake has to be held by women, which is under revision, and that will get revised. But like even the DPIT state ranking that they do, it's across 11 parameters, and one huge parameter is on how many women entrepreneurs have you created in your state, right? So pretty much every state has a women-led fund. Seed capital or different kind of schemes. Kerala has it, Karnataka has it, Orissa has it, right? But a lot of women don't even know about it.
Give us a sense of the sizes. Are we talking of 2 lakh rupees, 3 lakh rupees, 5 lakh rupees?
So they're different ranges, right? Some of them are as small as 2 lakh. That is when it's at a very idea stage. And they go up to 15 to 30 to a max about 60. But from a government grant fund. And these are usually given out through incubators and accelerators, through different programs and funds. If I have to just quote Karnataka, for example, they've picked 4 incubators and 4 accelerators to just focus on building women entrepreneurs in Karnataka. Kerala has something very similar, right? And then there's schemes like Tide and Samrit, which are, of course, not particularly women, but like those funds, there are various other women-led funds as well. And the prime driver for that is state governments and central governments. But the lack of visibility on that is concerning.
If I may interject, Maharashtra has one as well, and
Yes.
I'm on the board of directors. So if anybody wants to apply, please.
Awesome. So I think the message here we want to drive is that access to capital has many forms. Clearly, and we wanted Kritika specifically for this purpose, and for folks who missed it, we even had a NWPC a few weeks ago.
Just on September.
September, right? So focus on it, 2, 1 online, 1 eventually in person. A lot of focus is there in making sure this information is available. Maybe we're not doing a very good job of highlighting it, so we wanted to bring it, front and center and talk about it. From the sense she gave me as we were talking, hundreds of crores of rupees is available up for grabs. Is that a fair statement? Right? And it can vary depending on states and stuff like that. We're not talking, itsy-bitsy here. We're talking hundreds of crores of rupees allocated by the government, available. Now, the question people have asked is, well, why is this not available across and why is it only for women founders? That's not the case. There are specific funds to increase the pipeline, right? We struggle for applications in many cases, right? So this is done, this is done to accelerate, to increase, to encourage, right? More applications coming through, more women founders sort of coming through, right? Hanisha,
Yeah.
so we talked about the government funding. From your perspective, you've seen thousands of applications over the years. Give me your perspective in terms of course, you're also focused on impact funding, which is also a huge space, and ESG is now everywhere. How do you see sources of funding? And then we'll talk to Akansha about what she's observed.
So, in terms of sources of funding, like you rightly said, I mean, there are the ones that are available just for the women. There is that benefit. Over and above that, of course, you're free to apply for every other funding source out there, right? But most commonly, we tend to go inward out, right? The first source of funding is you yourself, which is bootstrap capital. The second source of funding is probably what is called the 3Fs, the friends, family, and fools round. And that's where I think the first stumbling block comes in. Women historically have been known to tap into the friends and family network much lesser. They tend to over-index on the bootstrapping, that they'll do a lot in terms of bootstrapping. They will approach customers, try to get customer money for sure, which is solid and required. But going to friends and family seems to create a stumble. And that's where I think we'd like to perhaps begin with something actionable here, saying if you're a female founder, don't hesitate in going to friends and family. And I think the most common reason I've heard across all the founders that I've met is this whole fear of that being treated as a personal favor. That if I'm going to someone I know who's pretty well off and is investing in many other areas of investment, many other investment vehicles, but if I take my startup pitch deck to that person and that person puts in a check of whatever, 10, 15 lakhs, is that a personal favor? Will I burn my bridges with that person if I actually take that money and the company doesn't do well? Whereas we don't see that amount of hesitation on the same topic from a male founder. So that's perhaps
that's a critical point, right? And we'll talk about pitching, and I have a question there. So your message is that even if you're talking to friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, etc., you're talking about a business transaction.
Yes.
Right? It's not exactly a favor you're asking.
Precisely. I mean, you wouldn't be in this business if you weren't sure it would do well. It would generate a profit. Maybe not today, maybe in a year's time. And if you sort of think back to PK's talk from last evening, he said, right, all of us are grown-ups. The person who's putting money into your startup is equally a grown-up. They're an investor. They've invested in other forms of capital improving sort of schemes. They can evaluate what you're offering versus what else they're seeing. So allow them the privilege of saying yes or no to you. Don't say no on their behalf by not approaching them in the first place, is what I'd say.
So, pitch,
yes.
Right? And I'll come to Akansha also,
Pitch
and I want to also, Hanisha, to talk about this, is that when I go talk and pitch about who I am, either for a job or for funding and stuff like that, the anecdotal data suggests that women tend to be a little bit conservative in highlighting their accomplishments or skills or achievements, or everything. Is that a trend you've seen, observed?
Yes, undoubtedly. Both in terms of sort of, if you're out there asking for a raise or a promotion, that shows up. Yeah. But as a founder, it has double consequences. It's not just your personal career that you're putting on the line. It's the potential size of the organization you'll create. If you think small, if you're always sort of second-guessing yourself, you're pretty much limiting yourself to a much smaller organization and therefore a much smaller impact. Every organization, whether or not they say they have a stated impact objective, will have an impact of some sort, right? Why would you, if you had the same 24 hours, why would you use them to create a smaller amount of impact than you potentially could? So that's the whole thing.
Akansha?
Yeah, I think the third source of fund, and just adding to Hanisha, I think this was a great learning for me. Like, go out and raise that family and friends around, because you're building something great, and just pitch it to people. But adding to that, I think getting money from seed investors and VC is all about keeping that thing warm. They need to know that you are building something, you are actually progressing in your journey, you have learned something new. And so, but unless you network and go out there, it's not going to happen. So because I'm an entrepreneur, I love to learn from my own mistakes, and this is something that I did not do. I would just like, heads down, let's build, and then we will go out there and raise. I think getting that upfront, which is networking, knowing people, so that when you have actually built, when you have actually got that many users, you know whom you can reach out to get the money.
So let's talk a little bit about reach out, right? Now, you're reaching out to an audience, and you made a point earlier when we were having this conversation. Your observation was that the mix of angel investors,
Yeah.
right, is not exactly the right mix. You want to highlight that a little bit?
So just anecdotally, right? So let's say there's an inbound investor and you are pitching to them. Most of the time, the person who's sitting on the other side is probably an investment associate who's like a 23-year-old. And if you're working on a problem statement that only women can connect to, so for example, my startup is all about for parents, that 23-year-old boy will not understand the problem statement in itself. So getting that money at the level of a PPT is not going to happen. They're like, what are you even talking about? But once you pitch it to another woman investor on the other side, they're like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. You know, this is great that you're trying to solve this problem. So essentially, I think the mix of angel investors in the ecosystem should increase. So women who are out there who have like been successful, I think getting into that mix and solving for that problem will be super helpful.
Let's just emphasize, very clearly so that we clarify. This is not about getting some sympathy or extra empathy from a women investor. This is about if half the world's population, right, is men and women, and the problems are there. If I'm pitching a cloud infrastructure pitch, I need somebody who understands cloud potentially, or at least has the understanding of the market size of the cloud to be able to make a judgment, right? Yeah. And if I'm pitching a problem around women's health or anything like that, I need a balance of investors to be able to say, yep, this is something I can get it, I understand, right? Yep. That's the point, Akansha. It's not about getting extra sympathy from a potential women. And I think the point is, we need a wider mixed diversity, not just in the women founders. It's also on the other side, which is the angels who are also decision makers.
Yes.
We're also decision makers. We're also decision makers. I think, Akansha is being shy and not telling me, but effectively shy.
We had this discussion. I think even if women have access to capital, they want this extra reinstating from other people around them to say, you know what, I will make that investment. Yeah. So you connect to the problem, you're like, yes, this is a great solution, but should I really invest in you? Can I just ask somebody else who probably knows more than me? And this will come down to the point of confidence, and we can kind of talk about that. But I think the whole idea is get more mix of investors in the angel space of women. I don't know, what does the statistics say?
7%.
But we should have
7%. At this point of time, 7% of all angel investors in India are women. So to their point, I mean, very literally, if you were a fintech startup, you wouldn't go to a VC who has never done a fintech investment, right? So from that perspective, just do your research about the investor pretty deeply to get a better sense of what they would invest in. That's something we do see, a mismatch, doing more of a spray and pray, just writing to as many people as you reach out. That doesn't work very well.
I think the call out here is that, women who have been professionals in different fields, etc., should very carefully look at getting into angel investing also. Yes. Is your recommendation, because that's going to increase the mix of the number of angel investors in the market, and have the appropriate gender balance.
Absolutely. And even if you're a working professional who has like 10 years of experience, start investing like small amount of money by yourself, and you will see it's a fun space to be in. Like you're actually solving your own problem. So
Absolutely. So it's not just a call out for more women founders, but in some ways it's also calling out we need more women angel, investors looking at these problems.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about access to capital, right? And we talked about how to reach out. Maybe we should emphasize a little bit more on that confidence,
Yeah.
right? And I know a couple of days ago, Hanisha and I were chatting late in the evening where you talked about, one founder saying we did X and maybe we should do
4x in about 2
4x.
years.
Tell us about that story.
Right. So this founder of mine was shortlisted for Shark Tank, and so we were running the numbers, and we said, okay, how big can this be in say 3 years, in 2 years, etc. So the numbers were like, okay, it can probably be 4x in 2 years' time, 2 to 3 year period. Till her male co-founder actually came and said, but we are operating in a 7,000 crore industry. Today we are at whatever 50 lakhs. 4x is about 2 crores. So you're saying we can be 2 crores in X number of years, but we are operating in a 7,000 crore industry, and we're trying to change people's behavior. If we just change the behavior of whatever 1/350th of the industry, it's going to mean nothing. So can we look at it from the opposite side? How much of this industry can we capture, and fast? So to that extent, I think women do tend to begin inward out, saying, okay, today I have this in X number of years with reasonable effort, how much can I be? Whereas, and therefore they don't arrive at the bigger numbers as often. I wouldn't like to generalize, but as often as their male counterparts, who may be thinking more from, let me just go out there and capture as much of the market as possible. What are the consequences? What could possibly go wrong? And when we reran the numbers on that, we figured out that, and so we basically reframed the problem to say, if you had as much money as you asked for, if you got as much money as you asked for, and therefore could hire the best, get the best resources, etc., how big could your company be? And the answer in that particular case was upwards of 200 crores. So the difference was 100x. And that's definitely sort of a reframing that each of us as founders needs to do.
No, when I heard this story, I was driving back from somewhere, it was late in the evening, and I was thinking about this story. I'm like, maybe the other co-founder had a different experience and stuff, and I probed on this, and Hanisha said, not exactly, they were of similar-ish backgrounds, but it became so stark that, that women founder was just, being cautious, probably. And maybe she would have done 10x or 20x, but just being so cautious in pitching. Now, that has ramifications. When you go from a 50 lakhs to maybe pitching for a 4 crores, an investor is looking at that as like, okay, so your aspirations are 4 crores, maybe you'll do 6 crores. Whereas you're doing 50 lakhs, and you go with an aspiration of saying,
200 crores.
I'm going to corner 6% of the market. It's a very different conversation you're having with the VCs.
Correct.
Let's go back to yesterday. Harish Bhai was here in the evening, and I think somebody asked a question like, why are we not as big as some of the other markets, right? Harish Bhai, who's founded NASSCOM, has seen this industry, a few X more than all of us combined, said there's only one thing. We're not thinking big enough. Right? We're not thinking. So we talked about this in our 10 commandments yesterday, right? With PK, Ram, and Atul on stage, like, think big, think big, think big. This is not just a nice mantra, a nice thing to say. Here's a live example of conversation between two founders where just that extra nudge of thinking big changed the discussion for them completely.
Correct.
Maybe they were valued after that conversation, maybe they were valued at a completely different level for the same amount of effort. It's not like they were going to spend less effort in getting to 4 crores versus 20 crores or 30 crores.
Absolutely.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so think bigger. That confidence is extremely important in sort of getting to your pitch.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about access to capital. We talked about pitching, right? Then comes a stage where execution gets in, right? Every startup founder knows you're going to run into challenges. The discussion we had was, how much of a network do you have where you can go ask for help, seek help, and be even open about help. You wanna
Exactly.
talk about this, Akansha?
And so this is just my bias, but I think as a woman, you think that if you are asking for help, you feel weak. So you don't want to ask for help for others. And the other thing is, because we don't network that often, we don't know who to ask for help sometimes. So I think the two recommendation would be, it's okay to ask for help. I mean, she was telling me like, this is entirely volunteer-run organization. Everybody here is like there to help. So you are giving something to that person who is giving you help as well. So go ask for help. And the other one is network with people, like who can give you appropriate help when you need it. So build that up front rather than trying to build it when you need help, basically.
So two aspects there, right? And I think you touched upon this earlier, and I want to amplify this again. Continuously build your network.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you want to ask for help, you want to have a network.
Yeah.
And not at the time like, I want help, but I don't know whom to ask, even when you've built the conviction that you want to ask. So continuously building a network is critical, right? And then within that network, not to be shy.
Yeah.
Kritika, you were trying to say something?
No, I just wanted to add from this very conference, right, just on a lighter note, we have pretty good number of women entrepreneurs here. There must have been at least like 100 of co-founders, like 100 of them who walked up to me and introduced themselves to me. And we've chatted and said, what can we do next? And, how can 10K help us? Or how can the product community help us? And all of that. I haven't had one woman founder walk up to me and talk to me.
Oh, wow.
I'm just saying that's reality, and that's where we need to work on.
It's evidence that we can do a whole lot better in the point Akanksha is raising, which is there's nothing wrong in seeking out, going and talking, reaching out to people, talking, building a network, because you don't know where Kritika is going to be useful to you within the next 24 hours, maybe.
No, so Narendra, that just circles back to saying, right? So sometimes maybe we are ourselves responsible for seeding that doubt in terms of how sustainably we are going to run our business, and how much are we going to scale our business, right? Because sometimes sometimes we always look at a lot of these things with just a very urban lens, right? And we're completely forgetting about women entrepreneurs in tier 2, tier 3 cities, and what's happening to them scaling.
And one thing we agreed, we're going to not look at problems and just look at prescriptions, right? Because we can spend a lot of time talking about the problems each of us has observed. So the prescription here, before Shreya throws me out completely, is that build your network, don't be shy to ask, right? Cannot emphasize that enough, right?
And
for each and everyone here on stage. Right? So
and if I may add, reframe it always for a second, try to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, whoever you're going out to for whatever purpose, and ask what's in it for them. And there is probably something in it for them. So again, to bring another anecdote, there's a sports tech startup, and I was like, can't you reach out to somebody in the Indian cricket team to be an angel investor for you? Because that would suddenly change your... And she's like, one of my advisors is a physiotherapist to some IPL team, etc., etc. So can reach out to name brand, somebody who plays for India 11. So I was like, and why haven't you? No, because I don't want to call in a favor. I was like, that guy is going to get something really meaningful out of this if he associates with you. Straightforward. 5 years down the line, his cricket career is probably going to sort of be on the decline, but if he's associated with you, and that could be a secondary career for him. There could be so many other possible benefits that you can start framing in your head if you start putting yourself in the other person's shoes for a minute. So don't always think of it as a one-way street. It's not you asking for a favor. But also think of what you can bring to... So Emerson has this very nice poem called The Squirrel and the Mountain, right? Where it says, the squirrel says to the mountain, I can't carry a forest on my back, but you can't crack a nut. So.
Yeah. All right. I know we're out of time, so what we agreed is at the end of the session, we'll make sure we summarize the things we talked about, right? So the number one prescription was look at all possible sources of capital, private risk capital, government capital, grants, through incubators, accelerators. There's a plethora of options, right? There's a plethora of options. There's a plethora of options also for women entrepreneurs to accelerate their journey, right? And if you don't know or not have seen enough of these things, ask, right? Reach out, send a mail to NASSCOM, reach out to your friends, ask, you'll find some. The second thing was, of course, this was more of a prescription for women who are professionals. Please try to become angel investors.
Yeah.
Also, right? You're going to help the ecosystem beyond your imagination.
Yeah.
Right? I think you can safely say that.
Totally.
Network. Right? There's no. We can't overemphasize this, aspect of sort of networking. Pitch at the right level. Don't pitch at a level below, you should be, right? Don't be conservative in pitching who you are. Whether that pitch is in terms of revenue or whether it pitches in terms of your skills, right? Be confident about your background, your conviction. That's going to show up. Not just it's going to make you look better. It's going to show up in your valuations and future rounds and everything. And like there's an old ad which says, "Puchne mein kya jata hai?" Right? Ask. Right? There's enough sources of help available. I think in our journey of trying to become sort of a $1 trillion economy, $5 trillion economy, if the 70-80% of the women founders which are missing from the risk capital, even if half of them show up, my personal confidence is that we'll get to that goal much, much faster, because once that founders get going, it's probably going to accelerate faster than everything else we can do. So thank you very much. Hope this was useful in bringing a perspective in terms of access to capital and how to move forward. This conversation can go on for a very long time, but we'll stop here. Thank you.